Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth.
Tell us,
and F
Joe.
you if you can't handle
No,
the truth.
F you!
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
She also was sitting on the Air Force One plane, prepping for the G7 in the president's suite on Air Force One. You're not the president, Jill. Look at Trump.
We finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
Biden's pardons, null and void. Big news for Liz Cheney and the J6 committee and Anthony Fauci and the rest of them. Oversight committee dropping a massive report that we're going to take a look at. You can see 100 pages here. The Biden Autopen presidency, decline, delusion, and deception in the White House. And if those executive actions are in fact null and void, maybe we'll see some prosecutions here. They posted this from Oversight today. Says Joe Biden was not running the show at all. Our new report exposes how Biden's decline was real and his aides covered it up. Aides didn't even know who was operating the Autopen to sign official documents and pardons, which is insane. Watch what they tried to bury, and we'll get into that video and the full report. But Pam Bondi also came out and says, woo, today, my team has already initiated a review of the Biden administration's reported use of Autopens for pardons. Says Comer and Oversight committees, this new information, this new report that we're going to read is extremely helpful, and his leadership on this issue is invaluable. We'll continue working with GOP Oversight to deliver accountability for the American people. And what's interesting about this is if they don't even know who is behind the Autopen, think about this in criminal case context, where you have, let's say, for example, a DUI case. You have a lot of evidence that needs to be assembled, in this case, generally blood or breath or something, and you have to create a proper chain of custody of the evidence. And if it goes missing, for example, if you have an officer transport a bodily sample from A to B, B to C, C to D, it goes into impound, evidence comes out, some forensic person takes it out, E to F to G, all of this, you got to follow the bouncing ball and connect the dots. And if you lose that, one of those components, letter C, is missing, that cop gets fired or killed or resigns, or he's charged with another crime, perverting it, whatever, then everything that came after that, as it relates to that sample of evidence, is now questionable. And your case might be dismissed literally because the chain of custody has been broken. That's for a criminal case. Shouldn't we expect at least the same standard of excellence of following the custody of the permission from the president to a presidential pardon? You would expect to see that. But that's not what we're seeing. Here's a short snippet. We're going to come back to this, but just to give us a little bit of a preview on what this report is going to detail, here is a montage released by the Oversight Committee.
Was the number one issue
Ron
in the
Klain,
campaign
Chief of Staff.
the president's fitness or his age?
Did you ever see President Biden in a wheelchair?
I do not recall ever seeing President Biden in a wheelchair.
And new information now on the people in his inner circle and how the cover-up actually operated.
Senior aides that worked here until just a couple months ago, the beginning of this year, manipulating an ailing president for their own gain.
How much were you paid for your role in the campaign in 2024?
Just a little bit short of $4 million.
I'm sorry, how much?
$4 million.
You believe that the president should stay in the race. Your own financial stake in the matter was a factor in any way in your advice to the president.
I don't believe that.
And when it comes to President Biden's decline, the official word from Biden world about all these news stories is that nothing has been revealed this week that shows that President Biden was anything but an effective president.
Yes, I noticed that he was aging in terms of his physical condition. I noticed that, he shuffled more.
That he has more stumbling over words and gaffes than he did at the beginning of the term.
His rhetorical skills were not as strong as they had been, and his speeches were less effective, I thought.
We talked about age. We knew it was an issue, and we tried to design a strategy.
We had a discussion at the senior advisor level about whether the president should have a cognitive exam.
Flashback now to the legacy media's complete denial of the president's cognitive decline.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth.
Tell
and
us,
F
Joe.
you if you can't handle
No,
the truth.
F you!
This version of Biden is the best Biden ever.
His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
Do you regret saying that President Biden had a mental acuity? He had a sharpness to him.
I said what I believe to be true.
Do you think he was as sharp as you?
I said I had not seen decline.
Come on. Oh, that guy's great. Here is the final release from Oversight. October 28, 2025. They say Thursday, this report is now out explaining that the report exposes how Joe Biden's top advisors and his personal physician concealed his mental and physical decline from America. The Biden Autopen presidency: decline, delusion, and deception in the White House. Writing the following. All right, James Comer and the Committee on Oversight has investigated the circumstances around Joe Biden's diminishing mental and physical capabilities. But even more troubling than a president experiencing a decline in mental acuity was the Biden inner circle, loyalists attempting to mislead the nation to ignore what we could all see with our very own eyes. Throughout Biden's term, people increasingly question the slurring of words, the mistaking of names, visible disorientation, confusion, dependence on his aides. Remember the Easter Bunny? No, Joe, get out of here. He almost had a heart attack. All of which we saw live. Serious cognitive decline, and it was a disaster. Now, the committee has investigated whether senior Biden White House officials possibly exercised authority of the former president or intentionally concealed his rapidly worsening state. And we found evidence to indicate they did both. 1, exercised authority of Joe, and 2, concealed the state of the president. The Biden Autopen presidency, perfect name for this, the BAP presidency, ranks among the greatest scandals in U.S. history. As Biden declined, his staff abused the Autopen and a lax chain of command policy to actually affect executive actions that lack any documentation, no chain of custody of whether they were in fact authorized. No records. While Biden became progressively less able to do the job, when every measure should have been taken to document this, to prove that Biden actually made the decisions, White House staff took shortcuts and ad hoc actions to keep the presidency floating. What the committee found is that there was, in fact, a cover-up of Biden's decline, and there is no record demonstrating that Biden himself made all of these executive actions that were attributed to him. Probably wasn't even doing any of it. A June 24 CBS poll found that 72% of the voters said Joe was gone, but his inner circle didn't care. Even his own physician, they testified in a way that drew very different conclusions than everybody else who could just open their eyes and watch. Those same advisors continue to hold those beliefs today. They don't even say it was a concern at all. After the launch of Joe's 2020 campaign, Biden's future comms director, Kate Bedingfield, described questions about his mental acuity as a disgusting smear tactic. And this is a false, misleading conspiracy theory. When asked directly on a podcast if Joe had dementia, Karine said, "I can't even believe you're asking me that question. Don't you know who I am? I'm a historic lesbian black woman who's a press secretary. Don't ask me that. That is incredibly offensive." Ron Klain said the same thing. Robert Hur, though, then came out and said, actually, Joe's brain is gone. They said this is gratuitous. And Karine and Ian Sams lied to all of us repeatedly because they're liars. The White House comm strategy was literally to obfuscate the truth. There were concerted steps to shield the public from simply observing reality. We had longtime physicians, Kevin O'Connor. He recklessly never conducted a cognitive exam of the president. Never. He invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and said specifically that he confirmed Joe was fit to be the president, a key figure in the cover-up, refused to answer questions about his duties, didn't want to talk about succumbing to political pressure, and closed up. Now, Dr. O'Connor, who had business dealings and also financial connections, is not the only participant in this scheme. Mike Donilon, senior advisor to Biden, was responsible for getting accurate polling data back over to Joe. And he told the committee, I have this clip, that he was going to make $8 million by keeping Joe in the race and getting him reelected. These incentives, among others, motivated the inner circle to conceal the decline. Anita Dunn, another longtime operative who served as senior advisor, also told the committee that the former president's senior advisor reached a consensus to not give him a cognitive exam. No kidding. Despite persistent calls to do so, this revelation that the political advisors interfered with his health care is a cover-up, and it was corroborated by his second chief of staff called Jeff Zients. And here is just one clip of Mike Donilon, and watch how this dude just struggles to even answer this very simple question. How much money were you paid? And how much money did you stand to be paid if Joe Biden won again?
That's my view. Just to be clear, would the amount of pay you received for your role in the campaign, would that have changed depending on how far into the race President Biden made it?
My sense is that the money was a guarantee for the campaign, that we had had a negotiation, and that's my memory of the agreement.
Would you have received a bonus depending on the way the campaign went? Was that a possibility?
How the campaign went.
Yeah.
Were there any circumstances in which you would have received a bonus?
Great follow-up.
Yes, it was.
What were those circumstances?
That Joe Biden would have been reelected president of the United States.
Oh.
What would the bonus have been?
I believe it would have been $4 million.
In addition to the $4 million that you were already
Double.
Yes.
$4 million to work on the case, another $4 million if you win. How about that? So does he have an incentive to make Joe win regardless of his actual capability of doing the job? Of course he does. He's got 4 million of them. So that is the one guy who they reference. The inner circle and their resistance to any medical exams may have hurt Joe Biden's chances. And it was successful. It was not until the disastrous debate performance that anyone in Biden's orbit said, we might want to check this dude's brain. Zients specifically at the time called for a full workup. He says, what happened to his brain following the debate? Now, the cover-up up until the point was facilitated by extremely loyal senior staff. Annie Tomasini, Anthony Bernal, the work husband of Jill, both of whom pleaded the fifth. They don't want to talk. Bernal pleaded the fifth when asked if any unelected official or family members executed duties of the president. How come he can't just say no? Tomasini invoked the fifth when asked if anyone in the Biden family was ever asked to lie about Biden's health. Why can't she just say no? Dr. O'Connor, Tomasini, and Bernal, they all invoked the fifth. They all refused to be transparent because this is a cover-up. Even after Biden left, the committee was unable to determine the totality of actions taken by Bernal and Tomasini to conceal Biden's decline. And the committee is now urging the DOJ to investigate Bernal and Tomasini to get the truth for the American people. Now, our investigation revealed, says Congress, that Biden officials, at the behest of inner circles people, went to great lengths to prop up the former president after he began to lose his ability to function. These steps ranged from addressing Biden's makeup, his clothing, his schedule, the number of steps that he could walk or climb, the amount of time that Biden needed to read and spend with family. They worked on meticulously stage managing him, limiting the number of events he participated in, lightening his workload, making it difficult for even senior Democrats to talk to him, keeping cabinet meetings to a minimum, eliciting direction from Hollywood on State of the Union and other events. They used teleprompters even at small, intimate events to try to fake everybody. And COVID was very useful. Joe was like in a bunker the whole election, and they stole it. The investigation revealed holes in the chain of custody of the president's decision binder, which contained decision memos to be signed or initialed by Joe when approving or disapproving executive actions, as well as numerous instances in which the president's approval for an executive action was not memorialized. Among the most flagrant of these instances are the clemency actions taken in Biden's final days, which not only lacked a decision memo, but also raised serious concerns from Biden's own DOJ and their ethics lawyers about whether the president was aware of the criminal backgrounds when making these decisions to grant clemency to violent criminals. Testimony before Congress confirmed that the pardons signed on January 19, 2025, which included pardons for members of Biden's family, were apparently the result of an in-person meeting in the final hours of the presidency, for which there is no, see that underline, there is no contemporaneous documentation. Nothing is in writing to verify that it came from Biden. Instead of actual documentation, the decision to grant these pardons was allegedly communicated secondhand to a Zients aide, a chief of staff person called Rosa Poe, who then called Zients, who verbally authorized the use of the Autopen from home. Now, Zients did not even know who actually had used the Autopen to apply the signature after his aide, using an email account with his permission, communicated the Autopen was authorized for clemency actions. Zients did so without confirming with Biden that Biden did in fact grant these pardons after repeatedly telling people that he would not pardon his son, Hunter, let alone 5 other family members in the waning hours of his presidency. Poe subsequently sent an email on the chief of staff's behalf stating, I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of all the following pardons. Thanks, Jay-Z, Jeff Zients. Hiding it in his assistant's email. Just like James Clapper did, that corrupt DNI, who used his assistant's email to open up an investigation into the Russians because Obama ordered it to be done so. In light of Biden's cognitive deterioration and the cover-up, this approval process, writes Congress, calls into question the validity of all pardons granted by Biden throughout his tenure. Invalid. The committee deems void all executive actions signed by the Autopen without proper corresponding written and approval traceable to the president's own consent. Null and void all executive actions from Congress because there's no record. You can't prove that Joe approved anything. There's no documentation. Our findings detailed herein make clear that as Biden was losing command of himself throughout his time, his executive actions, especially his pardons, of which there are many, cannot all be deemed to be his own. And other people don't have the pardon power. Sorry. The authority to grant pardons is not given to his inner circle. It cannot be delegated to particular staff when his competency is in question. And even if his authority could be delegated, which it can't, it would have to be expressly delegated by him. The Constitution is clear. It says the president, you have the power. That's it. He must make the decisions. And the courts can say if the president did not make that decision, then it's void. As we've said, charge them and then let them defend their pardons. The committee recommends the DOJ investigate all of the former executive actions, particularly pardons and clemency, to assess whether any legal action must be taken to void any action that he did not himself take. Can the DOJ actively do something to void them out, or maybe just charge them and then argue they're voided in court? Bunch of details in here. These are the key people all involved in the investigation, and many depositions also happened. Here you go. White House Staff Secretary Neera, Kevin O'Connor, the doctor, Ashley Williams, Bernal, Ron Klain, Mike Donilon, we just heard from, Ian Sams, who said he met with Joe twice, special assistant to the president, met with him basically twice. Now, Dr. O'Connor was complicit. He was Biden's physician and ran interference. He found in February 24, he said Joe Biden's a healthy, active, robust 81-year-old male who remains fit to successfully execute the duties of the president. That conclusion obviously inexplicable, but it makes sense when you realize that Dr. O'Connor had great incentives, including financial incentives, to participate in this grand scheme. And he refused to voluntarily speak with Congress. He got a subpoena to testify, but didn't want to talk. He said, I'm going to invoke my Fifth Amendment right and the physician-patient privilege. But he says that's inapplicable. You can't use that here. This is Congress. Now, as the official physician to the president and the personal physician to Joe for 15 years, he provided a lot of updates, and he is the only known person who can speak about Joe Biden's physical capabilities. Here are some questions that he refused to answer. Dr. O'Connor, who handled Joe, were you ever told to lie about the president's health, doctor? On advice of counsel, I invoked the Fifth. Hey, question for you. Did you ever believe that Biden was unfit to execute the duties of the president? How about no? Just say no. He doesn't want to answer the question because he knows the answer is yes. Now, we had more of his deposition. Here's a little bit of it. Did Dr. O'Connor mislead the American people? He pleaded the Fifth many times over, and here is what that sounded like, courtesy of Joe Biden's doctor.
Dr. O'Connor, were you ever told to lie about the president's health?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon the physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer. I must follow my lawyer's advice in this matter.
Just say no.
Let the record reflect that Dr. O'Connor has invoked the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Dr. O'Connor, please be very clear. Are you declining to answer the question put to you solely on the ground that you believe the answer will incriminate you?
On the advice of counsel, I must respectfully decline to answer based upon the physician-patient privilege and in reliance on my right under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. I am not a lawyer, and I must rely on my lawyer's advice in this matter.
Yeah, so he's either a terrible doctor who can't even recognize dementia when it's slapping him in the face, or he's a liar. Maybe he's getting $4 million like the other dude was. But the inner circle admitted they interfered with this. Anita Dunn confirmed suspicions that the inner circle meddled with his health care in order to maintain political power, regardless of whether Joe even knew what was happening. Anita Dunn, she admitted to the committee that they had a discussion about whether he should have a cognitive exam, and they were talking about the politics of it. Would that address some of the attacks that Biden is getting? No, because the exam is going to show he doesn't have any cognitive function at all. That's Anita Dunn. Jeff Zients, also the chief of staff, corroborated Dunn's testimony. He said, yeah, we did talk about it. I do recall the communications team brought forward, led by Anita, whether he should have a cognitive test. And of course, they didn't do that. They deferred over to Dr. O'Connor. He didn't run the exam, and the cover-up continued. Other people also discussed healthcare, this guy Bruce Reed, and they wanted to push back on this. The inner circle and their campaign to resist any medical examinations that may have hurt his chances were successful. It was not until the president's disastrous debate performance that anybody considered the need to examine his capabilities. Jeff Zients said this September 18, 25, recently. I do recall post-debate having a discussion with a doctor where I thought it was important for the president to get a full workup. In a response to that, and Dr. O'Connor took that on board. But inexplicably, his request appears to be the only and first time anyone ever brought this up at all. His testimony is that he heard Dr. O'Connor say, well, cognitive exams are meaningless, and so we don't need to run an exam on him. They don't even show anything. But none of the annual exam reports mention any form of any testing on Biden Biden's brain because they didn't really need his brain to work. We all saw it. We saw him fall, trip, stumble, lose his train of thought repeatedly. Yeah, here's the Easter Bunny attack. Less than 6 months after O'Connor said he was amazing, the American people witnessed a viral moment where the special assistant to the president, Megan Hayes, that's who was in there, the special assistant put on a costume. She interrupted the president and ushered him away from reporters in an attempt to avoid unscripted communications. Okay, let's see if this link works. One of my favorite links ever.
The nest, I repeat. Take a listen to this or
Joe
watch
Biden
this.
got his heart.
Pakistan should not, and Afghanistan should be people.
Oh, the Easter Bunny, Mr. President.
Yeah, see that face right there? She almost gave him a heart attack. That was a special assistant to the president. Guys, look at him. He's petrified. Grim Reaper's here right in front of Joe. That was a special assistant to the president who was running interference. They put her in an Easter Bunny costume to go stop him from talking to the press. The State of the Union was an anomaly. They probably pumped him up full of methamphetamines or whatever, just regular amphetamines. Then, after the State of the Union, his performance, which displayed deterioration, confusion, was so shocking. Even Ron Klain explained during the debate, once the debate came down, man, it was a disaster. Ron Klain said something like, "We're F." Hunter also said on a podcast that they gave Biden Ambien to be able to sleep, which resulted in him getting up on stage looking like a deer in headlights. Since Hunter made this allegation about unidentified people giving the former president Ambien, every White House or campaign employee interviewed denied Hunter's allegation. Yeah, that's interesting. Somebody just smuggling drugs to the president? Like, does the president just take non-prescribed drugs that Hunter smuggles into the White House? Was the president on Ambien? Maybe that explained it. So obviously there's a cover-up and the doctor's complicit in that. Anita Dunn also explains it. They wanted a full workup. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And now they're all invoking their Fifth Amendment. There was a major conspiracy to cover this up, and there were $8 million incentives. As we listened to Mike Donilon, $8 million in order to get Biden elected. Strong financial incentives, and they became close over the years, and he wanted to get paid. So they just kind of, he's good enough, right? $4 million, it's worth it. Donilon and others were all controlling every step of this. The inner circle was also led by Ron Klain and had been there for a while, was so close to the Biden family that he later donated thousands of dollars to Hunter Biden's legal defense. Incredible. For his crackhead son. Klain provided the committee a clear example of how advisors screened information which made it to the president's desk. Mike Donilon, a part of that. Question for Jeff Zients, chief of staff. Did you ever speak with Ms. Tomasini about any kind of physical accommodation so that Biden could get on the stage? She said, well, yeah. And so how do you reduce the number of steps? Things of that nature. Like just drive the car right up to the podium, So that has been reported on publicly, but Annie was the point for the president. And so she made sure he got his exercise sessions and all of the rest. Now, Biden was increasingly getting confused and disoriented, and age issues kept coming up, and they wanted to make sure he got appropriate reading time and family time and all of the things. Did discuss the age issues with Anthony Bernal, but the innermost circle of the Biden administration, all of it ran through the First Lady's office. Wow. Jeff Zients testified that Bernal thought through settings and frequency of interactions of the former president, and he thought that Bernal, who was on Jill's team, she played in making key decisions, were deeply concerning because Joe was losing his mental faculties. Example, September 20th at a cabinet meeting, the First Lady started the meeting in the West Wing by offering substantial remarks before the president's cabinet. She also was sitting on the Air Force One plane, prepping for the G7 in the president's suite on Air Force One. You're not the president, Jill. Doctor. The committee has extensive questions about Jill and Bernal and exactly who was doing what. They even went to Hollywood and got their professionals, Katzenberg and Spielberg, to help Joe figure out how to deliver the State of the Union. And throughout the presidency, they were just trying to make his job less difficult. Didn't want to answer many questions about it. Said he commented that the president flying from Italy to LA is a lot to ask. That's a big trip. Italy to LA? Man, how's he going to make that? Donilon answering questions about that. They scripted a bunch of events. We watched it. They explained exactly where to walk. And ask this journo this question. Hey, you do this. Then this happens here. Like paint by numbers for the idiot president that we had. Inner Circle and Communications also had a cover up. Many people deeply involved. And a lot of this is kind of, repetitive a little bit. Daily news summary. Remember these stupid cards that he had to walk around with? Why did you? Joe's like, you. Who is that? Is that me? me or is that you, the reporter? It's capitalized, so it's probably me. Why did you change your mind on the Hunter pardon? Well, he's targeted. And I believe in the justice system, but also believe politics. In fact, why did you decide, when did you decide to do this? Won't this hurt your legacy? Like they had to just script everything out for the guy because his brain was completely fried. Then they kept lying to us. No, he's great. The inner circle used Ian Sams to also execute a scheme. Sams rarely interacted with Biden. Remember, he's that bald guy with glasses we've seen a lot of. He met with Joe 4 meetings. That's all. Describing his meetings is very infrequent, but he went out every day. Oh, Joe Biden's great. He was the comms director. Then, of course, we got the Robert Hur report. Robert Hur came out, said, yeah, Joe Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory. Sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. We all saw that. That was back in February 2024. Then Ian Sams came out and said, oh, it's gratuitous. This is completely inappropriate. Actually, Robert Hur was exactly right. And they smeared him as well. All but confirming his deterioration, the audio came out. President Biden couldn't even remember basic details like when his son passed away, when his term as VP concluded, why he had classified documents in the first place. They wanted the audio and they fought that forever. Then we got the audio and like, oh yeah, he's been gone for months. Then the cover-up happened as well. Many of them invoked the Fifth Amendment because they can't just say no. Here's this woman, Annie Tomasini. Mr. Bernal, question. Jill's work husband. Was Joe Biden fit to exercise the duties of the president? Fifth Amendment. Mr. Bernal, did any unelected official or family member of Joe execute the duties of the presidency? Fifth Amendment. Thank you. Here's one from Anthony Bernal, Jill's work husband. What he looks like. Dr. O'Connor, as mentioned earlier, pleaded the Fifth as well. Ashley Williams, she stated she did not know, could not recall, or did not recall 200 times. Okay. I don't remember anything. Can't recall. These are the people who are running our country. All of them liars. Biden's senior staff were willing to conceal his deterioration because they wanted to win and they wanted money. Biden aides also testified, but none would admit that he was cognitively declined. So they're holding to their lies. Karine, not that I recall, everything's great. I never spoke to anybody about Biden's mental health, says Karine. Lots of just kind of standard questions there. There's Karine in her depositions. And this is a major document. Anita Dunn, some questions. Ron Klain, more from him. So it's a summary of all the interviews. Here's some more. Biden have mental and cognitive health to serve as president. Does not, 65%. Yep, not good numbers for them. They dismissed instances where Biden screwed up. They just said, oh no, it's a stutter. Remember that from Jake Tapper? Biden's childhood stutter suddenly reappeared when his brain failed. Isn't that convenient? The cover-up persisted throughout 24. Many Americans thought he's not going to run again, but they had no choice. He then did decide to run again. Everybody went, what? 14 interviews all revealed that they all supported his reelection. They're going to work diligently and they're going to cover up his mental decline. Then they actually wanted to move the debate up. Remember? The earliest presidential debate in history. Because if it went on too long, there was some thesis that they wanted Joe to fail and fall on his face now so they could sub Kamala in. Americans witnessed an incoherent debate. It was a disaster and it was an epic one to watch. Biden's reelection campaign put the decline on full display. Then they had to nuke him and shove in Kamala without anybody voting for her at all. On June 27th, it was the debate. They scheduled the debate in a hurry because they wanted to conceal the truth. They said, we got to get him out now. Another 3 months go by, his brain's going to be totally fried. Age was a surrogate, became a surrogate for the cognitive and physical ailments. Why would an early debate change voters' view? Klain says, yes, I think it would. I think that his age became a bit of a surrogate for his capabilities to serve another 4 years. I thought that him performing robustly against Trump would show voters he had the fight and the feist to continue to serve. That didn't work out. Bad call there, Ron. More from Jeff, more from Steve Ricchetti. This person over here, Steve Ricchetti, and they remained on script for the debate. The debate happened. We all watched it, a crash and burn. Here's some of Joe Biden. 12 minutes and 15 seconds into the debate, Joe Biden came out and said, we beat Medicare. Remember that? Here's this one.
We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to dealing with everything we have to do with.
Look at Trump.
We finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
And then they realized we're doomed. Because I thought the president's answer on that question had been halting, he had stopped in the middle and paused inexplicably and then had delivered that sentence that made no sense. And everybody went, oh gosh, Joe's gone. Our president's gone. So they couldn't reconcile it. This guy is asked about it. We finally beat Medicare. What does that mean? Well, this guy goes on with some rambling answer. So, all right, this is the report. Joe Biden's brain is totally gone. A lot of people in the president's orbit confirming that. But here we go on the Autopen. Who was actually operating it? Following Kamala's decision not to enter the 2028 California governor's race, the New York Times highlighted Biden's mental decline. This piece, which is notably not in the opinion section of the newspaper, assumed the fact that Biden's acuity deteriorated before the American public. Senior aides interviewed were unwilling to acknowledge this, but our investigation shows his mental capabilities actually impacted his ability to be president. And the approval process for these pardons was ripe for exploitation. Bruce Reed said this: "At times, I sat with Biden while he reviewed his decision book and decided whether to accept, reject, or amend recommendations. The president signed decision memos. They went back to the staff secretary, who was responsible for ensuring the decisions were documented. This practice is like the two prior administrations, where everything is memorialized. Now, however, additional testimony said that there were no processes for these. And Tandon only saw the president once every 6 to 8 weeks. So the people who would confirm with the president couldn't confirm with the president. There were no face-to-face meetings, unlike President Trump, who's right there. This is Trump getting handed the documents and signing it. Not a question about it. Here's another one from the president. Here's another one. But that didn't happen with Joe. It was all auto-penned out. Witness testimony indicates that the return journey for materials was similarly opaque. Documents would go out, then they'd come back. The White House's decision-making procedures were so lax that the chain of custody for a given decision is difficult or impossible to establish. Perfect. Documents that were used to predicate executive actions should be sufficiently traceable to ensure they reflect the will of the president. I mean, like your mortgage documents, are recorded. Instead, the Biden White House and their flimsy procedure was extremely vulnerable to abuse. And much like the processes for ascertaining the decision on executive actions, same with the Autopen, the use of a device that replicates Biden's signature should be documented very clearly. But they didn't do that. Tandon oversaw the use of the Autopen, but did not physically operate it. She explained that she would inform the White House clerk called David, and then he would have his staff actually auto-pen the document. Who said, did you ever personally witness the auto-pen use? No, not until late in my tenure. Do you know who the people or person who actually operated the auto-pen were? Do you even know who they were? No, I don't. Great. Did your office track the documents that were signed by the auto-pen? No, they did not. Now, a recently uncovered document indicates that there may have been a specific set of guidelines that should have governed this, but apparently it wasn't actually followed. Here was a memo that was apparently published February X 21, and it does denote, it says you have to hand sign pardon letters right there. Now, the presidential pardon game of telephone, as we talked about here, reveals that some decisions were dubiously authorized. To your recollection, Ron Klain, were there any situations where you didn't use this formal process? Yeah, there were times when Biden made decisions orally, where we'd have members of the cabinet in the room and he would say, I would just do this. Okay, after he said that, would you document it since you're the chief of staff? I think there were times that we did, and there were times where we didn't. I remember a couple. Well, I remember one specifically was the decision to have a vaccine mandate for the armed forces, where Secretary Austin came in and explained, I want to do this. Because remember, Lloyd Austin was the double face masker, face shielder. And so he just said, yeah, go ahead and do it. So there were verbal authorizations, but recently uncovered documents and testimony also indicates that even when a verbal decision was memorialized in an email, it doesn't prove that Biden made the decision. It's just somebody else saying that he did. Here's this one from Jeff Zients, January 19th, one day before Trump comes in. I approve the use of the Autopen for the execution of the following pardons. Thanks, Jay-Z. All for the president's fam. Now, he said, even Zients, who approved this, oh, so you were at the meeting with Joe? No, he didn't even attend the meeting. He wasn't there physically or virtually, during which time Joe allegedly said, I approve the pardons. In fact, Rosa, the staff member who actually sent that email, also did not attend the meeting. According to Zients, the game of telephone went as follows. So here's how it went down. Bruce Reed, Ed Siskel, and others went to a meeting with Biden on the 19th to discuss the pardons. Then others, Reed and Siskel, walked back from the meeting and told Rosa Poe. Then Poe called Zients at his home and said, here's what happened inside the meeting. Then no one called the president. Zients sends an email saying, I approve this. Poe sends an email on Zients' behalf approving the use of the Autopen. And then somebody somewhere signs the actual pardons with the Autopen. It's like a joke. While it seems no pardon should be authorized through this ridiculous game, it's worth noting that this included some of the most controversial pardons that exist. Biden's family members, criminals. Anthony Fauci, criminal. Mark Milley, criminal. And the January 6th Select Committee members, criminals. All of them got pardons because they committed crimes. Who knows if they're even valid? So they discovered a bunch of other anomalies. Remember, 2,500 people also got commutations. And the question was, who was doing the vetting on any of these individuals before it landed on Joe's desk? No one really knows. So the report is now out. Biden also pardoned Hunter before that. He said, I would not do that. And then he did. And I think he signed that one by hand. Then they educated him on how to respond to this. He granted more pardons and more clemency than anyone else, and apparently had no ability to do it. All of this subject to abuse. And in conclusion, this new report that invalidates Biden's pardons and would encourage the DOJ to do something about it, which they are, they write, faced with this, they hid the truth. The inner circle propped him up for his entire term. They kept him in the race despite knowing he was no longer fully in command. And shockingly, as addressed in this report to this day, over 1 year after the race, all of his people continue to deny their scam. The scripted rhetoric of the cover-up is so ingrained in White House staff that even Robert Garcia, this guy, attempts to maintain this illusion as he says Trump is the one who's losing his faculties. Now, Democrats, they only bothered to ask approximately 3 hours and 30 minutes worth of questions in this entire process. We had 47 hours of depositions. Democrats asked 3 hours and 30 minutes of it. When averaged across 14 interviews, they were asking 15 minutes of questions because they knew, everyone knew, but they just wanted Joe to win. Now, the cost of the scheme to hide the fallout, that what happened will never fully be calculated. The cover-up put our national security at risk, and no one even knows if Joe was in charge, which, may be responsible for a lot of the damage that was done, but it's his administration. White House aides were instrumental to the cover-up. Dr. O'Connor is deeply disturbing. He won't even answer basic questions about whether he falsified his health records. So, barring evidence of executive actions taken during Joe's presidency that show that he actually did take an action, we deem those actions that are taken through the use of the Autopen, including the pardons, as void, not valid. The validity of the actions allegedly approved and signed by the Autopen must be reviewed to determine whether legal action is necessary to ameliorate the consequences of any illegitimate pardons granted, any illegitimate executive actions implemented throughout the Autopen presidency. The committee finds numerous actions, especially the clemency actions, as illegitimate. Therefore, we urge the DOJ to investigate all of these actions attributed to President, allegedly, Joe Biden.